with devious dungeons, foreboding forests, and the coolest cats. Welcome to the Dark Orb. My name's Phil, and with me today I have the legend that is Paul Baldowski. I'm not sure how you pronounce your surname. I presume it's Baldowski.
Baldowski.
Excellent. I should have checked that first of all. I'm glad you do it that way and not the American way, I must say. Baldowski.
Yeah. I've had all of them over the years. Don't worry about it.
Paul, thank you so much for joining me. And we're here to discuss your awesome looking game that's on Kickstarter right now, the Dee Sanction.
Excellent.
I'm so excited about this. So I first saw mention of this probably about a month ago. And that graphic, the one that you've got on your t-shirt, was the first thing I saw. And as a fleeting pagan back in my late teens and early 20s, I sort of clocked onto that. That's kind of long gone now as I've kind of delved back into a sort of rational thinking mindset. But that was the first thing that I spotted, and then delving deeper and seeing the setting as being this really unique historical alt history, Elizabethan Enochian magic madness. There's nothing like it from what I know.
It's an area where there have been various people dipping in and out over the years. I mean, there are other Elizabethan games, you know, whether from the dim and distant past, like Maelstrom from the 80s.
True.
Or more recently, there are games that Ken Hite came up with a premise of one called the School of Night, almost exactly the same time, a little short time after I came up with mine, which is led to me going, "Oh, damn you, Ken!" But they're around. But it is an area that, bizarrely enough, hasn't been dipped into too much.
I don't think there's anything kind of really contemporary that is currently being played, you know, at a large scale. For example, there's certainly nothing in the kind of the large publishing realms that is. I mean, you're not seeing many of these games, for example, on your role-playing conventions as something that you can easily get onto. And I would argue that other games that you've been associated with, like there's a small game that a couple of people quite liked called the Cthulhu Hack, and I've heard that that's something that some people quite like. You know, there's one or two people had tiny little positive things to say, like, you know, awards and things, but nothing major, really.
Nothing major. No.
So I think it's really exciting that you've taken the decision to do this and to put it out there as a real tangible printed product. You've really been hitting the marketing in a great way. I really like what you're doing there, and the way that you're actually managing to capture the imagination. I saw quite a bit of the actual play from Games Expo, and I really like the setting. It's quite evocative. Can you tell me a little bit about the actual world for people who might be watching who don't really know about anything Elizabethan, let alone who Dee was, who is the Dee of the Dee Sanction?
So to caveat from the outset, I am by no means a historical expert, and in a way, that's kind of the angle I'm coming in here. I'm not expecting somebody who picks up this game to be a historical expert, in the same way that I never expected anybody to be a mythos expert with Cthulhu Hack, because therein, you know, you're already in a niche. Why would you want to make it nichier by making it less accessible? So
that's really good.
So the Elizabethan period, in my mind, is one of sort of transition and sort of tumultuous change, in that honestly, actually, every century, every generation has this sort of thing going on. But it seems that over the course of the 16th century, kicking off with Henry VIII and his decision as a fairly learned man to step away from the church for less learned reasons of simply wanting to divorce a woman, and not having the permission to do so from the Pope, I know it's far more complicated that, but we'll make it as simple as possible.
That'll do.
Yeah. So effectively, he steps away from the church. And the thing is, at the time,
And this is the Catholic Church, to be clear.
Yeah, from the Catholic
Yes.
Church. So thing is, at the time, the Catholic Church already had problems with a chap called Luther, who had his own issues with the way the church was going. And it became very much a case that, from a religious point of view, where the common people had depended upon going to church and being told about things effectively through the mouthpiece of the church, they were now being presented with it on a much more direct basis, that you could read the words yourself. The book of prayer and Bible were being published in English, or at least people were speaking it in English rather than in Latin.
Yeah.
But at the same time, for example, land-wise, people for a time were able to you could pretty much almost walk to a common spot of land and claim it, set a house down, put your garden in, buy a few chickens, and make a life for yourself. Suddenly, though, incrementally over the century, more and more land was being bought up. So the people who had depended upon the opportunity to make a living for themselves from their own labors were suddenly forced to be employed by somebody. And it meant that there was quite a move out of the rural environment into the urban environment, because people just didn't have anywhere to live anymore, and they had to find work. So on top of that, all sorts of wars going on in Europe, all sorts of unrest. You've got Elizabeth, who, when she does take the throne, pushes the country back away from Catholicism, and then pretty much blankly refuses to engage in any potential relationship with any other, king of any other country, no matter how much they tried. And the upshot of this is it was just as I said, a tumultuous period where there was all sorts of change going on, all sorts of unrest. And in the midst of that, there was this man, John Dee, who, depending on what books you read, he either doesn't feature at all or features really prominently. And we're taking that angle, that John Dee was a polymath, a man of science, a man of magic as well, who believed in all sorts of things, from astrology through to the power of geometry and mathematics. He was an incredibly intelligent, incredibly inquiring man, but also potentially he had the influence of connections with the Queen. He had a correspondence with her before she was Queen, when she was locked up by Mary, and after that, he was supposedly given the opportunity to actually cast her horoscope to work out the best day for her to be for a coronation. And beyond that, Elizabeth was a woman of science as well and learning, and she was interested in alchemy and languages, just as her father had been, as a learned man. So there's just a lot going on, a lot of opportunity, and Dee is involved in all sorts of things, both scientific and magical. And the premise of the game in the midst of all this is that Dee uses that prominence to coerce, in the nicest way possible, the Queen to believe that there is a benefit to establishing a organization that defends the British Empire against the supernatural.
It's just such an exciting premise. I really like this idea that, because it's, I mean, you kind of hit the nail on the head in terms of Dee's role, and certainly from my understanding, he, for about 20 years, he was like this advisor to Queen Elizabeth, and he was hugely interested in not only the science stuff, but actually taking that into that sort of mystical realm as well. And I know he was he had belief in angels and other supernatural beings and mythical kind of forces, I suppose. So having that idea that he's established an actual order, if you like, that's, and I mean, is this more like almost like a sort of secret society that is operating under the Queen, or is it a?
So in principle, during this period as well, the likes of William Cecil and Francis Walsingham were involved with the sort of secret service side of things. There was an intelligence capacity to elements of Elizabeth's court, because, as I said, it was a convoluted period when all sorts of countries and monarchs and organizations seemed to be turned against the Queen.
Yes.
So you had this secret service anyway to some degree, and that might be overstating what it was, but yeah, an intelligence sort of arm to the court. And the concept is that in 1563, the Queen, amongst other acts of that year, passed one against witchcraft and enchantment. Basically, with the concept that if enchantment was used in any way to damage or hurt somebody, or to coerce somebody, or indeed, bizarrely enough, to seek out treasures of the realm, like gold and silver, because the court was in a really bad way. And Elizabeth wouldn't want anyone else getting hold of treasure. So anyway, so this act went through. Basically, on pain of death, you're not to use witchcraft. In 1564, however, Dee has, through his connection with her and with Walsingham, come up with this concept of supernatural defense, and therefore an amendment is made to the act called the Dee Sanction, which is an allowance to use magic on behalf of the defense and protection of the Queen's realm.
So clever. I love it.
And so, to effectively turn the act a little bit on its head, the very concept that you would otherwise have been, sent to the gallows or otherwise executed for your acts of witchcraft or sorcery, those people who are on death row are given the opportunity to seek absolution or pardon for their crime against the crown by effectively swearing an oath to the service as part of the Dee Sanction. And the player characters in the game are these traitors seeking redemption through service to the crown by being agents of Dee.
So it's like, to use a contemporary analogy, we're looking at almost like a Suicide Squad kind of thing, to an extent, but mixed with the whole idea of a license to kill.
Yes.
In terms of your permission to do something that otherwise would be strictly forbidden and would lead to your own death.
Yes, and in principle, over the period that the game is notionally set, the game has a timeline in it which runs from the point at which Henry effectively broke from the Church of Rome up to the point where Dee finally falls out of favor at the start of the 17th century.
Yeah.
Well, not falls out. He dies at the start of the 17th century.
Well, that's pretty much the same thing.
Yeah, I mean, he falls out of favor at the end of the 16th century. So effectively, there is an opportunity to play in different ways. So after the Dee Sanction is established, that's more you're out there. We're here. We have a license to do what we're doing,
to do weird stuff.
Yeah, to do weird stuff, not to kill necessarily, but to do weird stuff. Whereas, for example, the actual plays that are linked to on the Kickstarter page, one of them, Lost in Translation, is set after that when Dee goes on a lengthy tour of Europe, seeking to acquire the support and to acquire the support, or at least get leaders of the various nations to lean in the direction of supporting the Queen and her cause. And during that time, there is a different kind of adventure in that you don't necessarily have carte blanche to do whatever you want because you're in a foreign country. But it gives more of an opportunity for sort of political intrigue mixed with some investigation. And actually, the further you get into Europe, the more you begin to realize that what has happened is that, and this connects back to what we were discussing earlier, when Henry makes this break and the whole business of the people approaching religion in a new way, part of the way the break with Rome happens is that the whole business of idolatry and the whole concept of the worship and of saints and so forth is completely broken down. And when that happens, it begins to, unbeknownst to everybody, tear at the fabric of reality,
Yeah.
and begins to allow the supernatural things that are only whispered in folklore and traditional tales passed by word of mouth, those creatures which have been effectively held back by a weakening dam of faith, of certainty in faith, not necessarily the right faith, but the fact that so many people were behind the single faith kept it back. That has now been torn apart. And so gradually over the period of time from the 30s onwards, more and more of these supernatural forces begin to break through. So like in Europe, the same begins to apply. And it becomes more and more obvious that without something done, and the Dee Sanction is all about doing it, that the supernatural forces ranged against the nations of Europe may well overwhelm them.
That's so cool. So the book itself, am I right in thinking it's like 60 pages? That's what you're aiming for originally?
Yeah. So the Kickstarter aims to fund a 60-page black and white compact core book. It's similar to the one that I previously released for the Cthulhu Hack, if only because I've learned that actually there is a place for that. There is I think that in conversations I've had, it's kind of like there's some people seem to have tired of the inch thick rule book and occasionally like those things ranged behind
this
you.
Is somewhere between my wall of it's somewhere between my wall of pride and my wall of shame. I can go through it. Like, red, not red, red, not red. That's the thing.
So you literally, you have the Cthulhu Hack to use the
very
sample,
unpopular game,
and then you have the Dee Sanction. So
awesome.
you have it's the same size, same format, and that's the core aim of the Kickstarter, to fund that. And there are stretch goals, which have in many instances already been smashed through in a way that has shocked and surprised me.
Where are we at right now? We're at £9,400 of your £3,000 goal. You've got 300 this is presuming that it hasn't changed, and if I refresh the page it will probably be different.
I've
379.
Yes.
I've just refreshed the page. I'll probably break everything now. 9,354, 378 backers. You are smashing it. You've still got 20 days. It's a fairly it's not completely short, but it's a shorter campaign, isn't it? 21 days.
It's another 40 minutes before we reach the end of the first day.
So well, let's see how we're doing at the end.
So at this point,
if the numbers dropped, I'm really sorry.
At this point, we've gone up to at least 64 pages. So there are at least 2 pages of additional art from Evelyn Moreau. And there are 2 pages for to extend the bestiary. So in the original book, there's a 2-page bestiary which includes a dozen supernatural creatures. There are 2 more pages now, and I'm not ruling out the possibility that there may be more. But the key thing for me, this is my first Kickstarter. I have backed many Kickstarters, way too many Kickstarters.
Same here.
But this is the first one I've run, and what I really didn't want to do was delay the core book by adding tons of content to it. I want that's really important to be the key. Yeah,
you need it to be solid, and also, I think this is where a lot of people get Kickstarters wrong. And this isn't a criticism of anyone that's run a Kickstarter, and I think it's not something that happens so much now. But the idea that with all your stretch goals, you add more and more content, you have to be really careful to make sure that you have the supply chain for that, and that you also have the artists and the contributors available and capable to deliver what you're looking to do. And then the other things, like, you put more stuff in the box, that's more stuff to pack, that's more stuff to ship. It drastically changes the cost of shipping. In ways that probably people don't tend to realize. You only need for it to tip over to the next shipping bracket to add, a horrible amount. And that can be for the sake of, 20 grams or something stupid like that. So getting that right is a real challenge. And I guess that's probably why a lot of people now are going more towards digital stretch goals as well. I like my physical books, but putting things out as supplementary PDFs is probably very appreciated for those of us who maybe have run out of space on their shelf anyway.
and that's I know what you mean.
This is not the only bookshelf. We have an identical bookshelf upstairs.
You can't see the piles of books that are on the floor behind me. Maybe you can. But
this is actually my dining room. This is what I'm.
This is my dining room. Where are you? So So you've got a 64 page,
Yeah.
given that it already hit the stretch goals for those extra pages.
Yeah.
Book. At this point in time, we've funded 3 digital adventures.
Excellent. Yeah.
And it's exactly what you said in terms of, I want the core book to be the thing that flies out, and to be specific, as I've pointed out in the Kickstarter itself, the core book here is,
The cover's fallen off, Paul.
The man himself. These things happen. It's my working copy.
Yeah,
this is printed on the home printer, and then the cover's over here for some inexplicable reason.
To make sure the cover works.
Yeah. So effectively, you've got the core game. You've got an introductory adventure, Lost in Translation, and then the digital adventures. The thing is, I can then send them out to the backers who've got stretch goal tiers, as and when, but I'm not beholden to include them in the core book. And I know there are then people who want to get physical copies, and physical copies will come out eventually. But I definitely don't want to tie in those physical copies to stop the core book going out. And the only other content for those who have been kind enough to support me at the Agent of D level, the glory,
definitely,
the glory that is the Agent of D game roll from All Rolled Up, in all its swishy wonderfulness. Those are literally being made now. So I have no, so we today, I was going to say we, I am part of All Rolled Up, but I'm almost a silent partner. So my wife is the owner of All Rolled Up.
Is that because you can't get a word in edgeways, or?
This is the only time when I get the opportunity to interrupt anyone. She's cut out the external plate of the.
We don't like the All Rolled Up products in this house.
No, not at all.
No, definitely not.
No, she's cut out the external face of the Agent of D game roll, just to confirm how many I could have, because I started with 75 and I have upped that so that there are 25 more available. But once once they're gone, they're gone. Because both the external material and the buckle on that, which is not a standard part of the fabric, All Rolled Ups, once it's gone, it's gone.
Yeah. So there are 12 left for that. At time of interview, there are 12 left at the Agent of D level. To be honest with you, for the price of it, for 50 quid, you get one of these with a metal buckle in the unique fabric. I mean, this I use regularly. I also have. So this is my one, and this has my dice in it, and I actually separate out my D6 dice because I run quite a lot of Year Zero and play a lot of Year Zero engine games, and then poly sets I was keeping in this. However, what's actually happened is that I've now swapped them around because I got a Wormwood dice vault. So that Wormwood dice vault now has my D6 in. This now has my poly sets in. So this one has become our. We don't want to put these dice in a container somewhere because actually they're really useful. But at the same time, we don't want them in our main dice bags container. And this is my other half. And we were just talking about a week ago about wanting to get another one. So, oh dear.
What an excuse.
How awful. Yeah. How am I going to cope with this?
But
I
told you this was my opportunity to interrupt people, which I don't normally get. No, I was just going to say.
That. Hang on, I've got a mute button here.
so the idea is absolutely. So as I said, they're literally being made now. So there's nothing holding them back. So even if you've gone for the core book and the All Rolled Up, they'll be ready. I'm not gonna promise that they'll go out before the target of April 2021. But the book is 95% written as I flick through here. And the All Rolled
you just need to put a cover on it.
Yes. The intent is not to hold anything back. So there are other stretch goals that we haven't quite hit yet, but again, they're not generating something that physically is going to hold us back. So you can carry on with your fine line about the 50 pound reward level.
Yeah, well, just that. I mean, the All Rolled Up products themselves, they're not super cheap. You get what you pay for, and they're handmade in the UK. the quality is excellent. I mean, my other half did choose to unpick one of the all rolled up things off of one of them,
Okay.
only because she then wanted to put her own patches on, and that was no easy feat, by the way, because they're just put together so well.
Yeah. I
you know,
mean, we went to. I was lucky enough to go to Gen Con 50. I'm trying to think. Was that 3 years ago
Gen
now?
Con, what's that?
Yeah, I know. So it was
A
actually the first time
gaming convention?
Yeah, indeed. Yeah, you remember those.
Yeah, once
So
upon a time.
we went to Gen Con 50, which was fantastic. It was a fantastic event to go to. It's a big deal. It's a big sort of investment to go to the States and take part in
Yeah.
it. And my wife, we went there with the business, and I was there because Cthulhu Hack, Haunter of the Dark, was nominated for an Emmy, but didn't get it that year. Yeah, I know it's terrible, but I did get to sit in the Ennies, and I was right up at the stage, and it was an opportunity, it has to be said, which I thank someone for. It was my one and only opportunity to meet the great Greg Stafford before, unfortunately, I met him that year. Before, unfortunately, we lost him.
Yeah.
And,
did you talk to him as well?
Yes, yeah, absolutely, yeah. So that was something memorable there. But so we went along, and the strangest thing was, we were there in Entrepreneur's Corner, otherwise known as the armpit of the Gen Con event. In
You're really selling it now, Paul.
Sweatiest, nastiest. No, the entrepreneurs get a cheap stand, which is right like in the furthest corner of hell. You have to push through like 3 holes to get to it. But we had tons of people come along, and it was fantastic. The people who would come up and do what you just did, they would hold up their all rolled up, their all rolled up, which they bought last year or the year before, and you could tell that they loved it because it was packed to capacity, and they were just so proud to present it, and it was beautiful.
The only challenge I have is with putting the I've got some of the dry wipe cards, which I must confess they're quite hard to clean. But they are the main reason why I struggle with rolling up my all rolled up. So, there you go.
Little bit of detergent and water, actually.
Yeah, I know.
Once it's been on there for a while. So.
Yeah, and they have. I mean, I was playing what was she? Circle of the Moon Druid, and so I had the creatures that I was most often changing into,
which is what I use them for.
Yeah.
My
character was changing into. Let's be clear here.
Okay.
But that does make it slightly harder to roll up. But you persevere,
Yes.
These are the most used things in our role-playing collections, I would say, other than the books themselves. Let's talk about the book, Ben.
Yes.
So I've got some screenshots. So most of these are just ripped straight from your Kickstarter. So I mean, that it's just such a classy looking cover. I know you held it up a little while ago, and the character sheets are pretty straightforward and simple. How does the system work?
So simplicity is something I've learned very much from Cthulhu Hack. Cthulhu Hack has 2 mechanics. Broadly speaking, Dee Sanction has 1, kind of, that the players need to worry about. So if you're used to the concept of the resource mechanic from Cthulhu Hack, where you roll a die and you ideally want to avoid rolling a 1 or 2, because in Cthulhu Hack that's bad. In Dee Sanction, I really love that mechanic, and I wanted to have something that made characters broadly competent, but gave the opportunity for failure to create the sort of narrative drive for the story without completely getting in the way of the story. So what happens is, if you've got a D6 in your physical stat, you will roll that when you're trying to do something. So you're battling a creature of the supernatural. You roll your physical, and if you get a 1 or 2, in fact, if you get any result, you broadly succeed. But if you get a 1 or 2, you fail forward or fix forward in that something goes wrong. Something goes it doesn't turn out for you. So in combat, that might well mean that you get hurt. And in other situations, the ones that come to mind, you're outside somebody's house in the dead of night. You're trying to break into their home, and as you are breaking in, you manage to make the roll to actually pick the lock, but you roll a 1 or 2. So what happens is you didn't realize that there is another door open in the house, and as you open the front door, it slams wide as the wind cuts through the house, alerting people inside. So you've got into the house, but you've gone and woken everybody up. So what do? You've been successful in what you were trying to do, but you've just made things more complicated for yourself. And so unlike the research, so the investigative resource in Cthulhu Hack, it doesn't go down when you use it and roll a 1 or 2. So in Cthulhu Hack, it's all about the slow deterioration of your connection with humanity. As you use your investigation skills, whenever you roll a 1 or 2, you lose a die and it slips down, so it'll go down to a D4. In Dee Sanction, if you roll a D6 and you get a 1 or 2, it doesn't go down to a D4, but something bad happens. The way that mechanically things change, though, is where you are in a situation where there are either things that are helpful or there are things that are unhelpful, which will make things more or less complicated, where the GM may tell you that in this situation, you've got 2 people helping you, they know what they're doing, the area is well lit, and they're keeping an eye on things, so you can actually increase the size of your die for this next roll. So you roll a D8 instead. Or if you've listened, and it's well worth listening to because it's short but gives you a taste of the game, the podcast from All Length Rex, which is also linked on the Kickstarter. There, somebody was actually had a D4 as their stat, their physical stat, and they were fighting a creature which was a formidable opponent. So I reduced the die, which means that there's nothing to roll. So they then had the opportunity.
What do you mean there's nothing to roll? There's a D3. I have a D3 right here.
There's not a D3. So what happens then is it's okay. You can do that if you choose to fail. So you will fail at this. You will achieve what you. Stop it now. No,
Dungeon Crawl Classics represent.
We go from D4 to D12 in this game, and there are no quirky numbers in between. But yes, you effectively get to choose to fail forward. But if you don't do it, it's going to be the worst kind of fail. Or you can just choose to push on and you get hurt. But that's it. That's the mechanic in the game. It's really cool. Roll the dice, and actually for those people who are firmly against the GMs never roll anything games, of which Cthulhu Hack is notionally one of them. In Dee Sanction, the GM can roll some dice sometimes. So
we'll come back to that, because actually one of the reasons why you and I started talking is I'm a huge I have a huge appreciation for your website, the Iron Pact, which is related to
Simbarum,
which is by far my favorite kind of large scale role-playing game. We'll try and come back to that at the end if we have time. That sounds great. I really like the sound of the system, and what with it only being 60 pages to begin with, it makes it much easier if you've got a very simple system to just pick the damn game up and run with it, doesn't it? And then you just need to kind of worry, I guess, more about setting the tone right, rather than whether or not you know every single rule and every single caveat to that rule.
And to a certain extent, if there was anything that sort of worried me in the development of the game, is I'm writing a game set in a period of history 500 years ago. So you kind of it almost feels like you're creating a barrier to play. However, as I've outlined, this period is like almost any other. There is stuff going on. There are wars. There are people who hate each other, and there's this weird and wonderful situation that of fighting the supernatural. And in its own way, there are elements that are very familiar to people who play other games. There is the potential to almost dungeon crawl in certain parts of the game. And there are, there's investigation, and there's things that you see in horror games. So there is enough of a connection, and there is a lightweight introduction to the period inside this, the book as well. So you're not kept, left totally to discover Elizabethan period. So there is guidance, and there's an adventure. And I always think so. Simbram, for example, to take your lead on it. when I started reading the Symbaroum core book, I think I was about 40 or 50 pages in, and I still wasn't.
I thought you were like, I was about 14 and I've
No.
just about finished
Oh
it.
yes, yeah. Oh yes, yeah. I'm merely in my early 20s now.
Oh, that'd be nice. Those were
I
the days.
when I started reading it, it's one of those books that has all the background at the beginning.
Yeah, it does.
70, 75 pages before you hit the system. And I
Yeah.
was reading through the background, and the background is glorious and atmospheric,
Yeah.
and the pictures are fantastic. But I wasn't feeling the game, and I needed to understand it. So what I did, and I've done this with other games since, is I started reading it backwards. I went to the last section. Oh, completely. We're not going Tolkien here, okay? So I went
No,
to
I
the last.
understand what you mean.
I
Yeah.
went to the last section, which is the Promised Land adventure, and I read
Yes.
the Promised Land, and then I went to the section before that, which is broadly speaking the GM section, and then
Yeah.
like the bestiary, and then the guidance for the game, and then before
Yeah.
that. And actually, by working through it that way, reading the adventure first gave me an understanding of what this game is about, and that's the idea.
And I think even with Symbaroum, the core book is wonderful, but I don't think it necessarily paints a wonderful picture of the actual game itself in terms of the published campaign. So we, in my home group, we've been playing it for about a year, and we're actually, this week, we're likely to start Throne of Thorns.
Mm-hmm.
And I've done enough reading to know how that whole campaign will likely play out, at least in theory. That said, if I had just gone by what the Promised Land is as a scenario, which is the scenario that's published in the core rulebook,
Mm-hmm.
that kind of has, whilst it has elements of everything that you find in Symbaroum, it doesn't even have the Dark Forest. You know, the Dark Forest of Avatar, and you pick that up and go, hang on, I thought this game was set in the forest,
Yeah.
but there's no forest, and actually, it's not a particularly political adventure either. And Symbaroum is a deeply political game.
Yes.
So if you go into that thinking, oh, well, it's going to be like, I don't really want to reference any specific games thinking about it because I don't think that does justice to Symbaroum. But if you think it's just going to be the wild forest equivalent of a dungeon crawler, you're going to be really surprised and maybe a little disappointed if that's what you're looking for. But I actually think that the action elements at Symbaroum are incredible, and the political sides are what make it such a great game. Humans, as Matthias Jonsson Horko, is one of the authors of Symbaroum, says, humans are kind of the worst monster.
Oh yeah. Oh, no, absolutely. But I think if you, given the whatever it is now, 300 personalities or something that are involved in the overarching campaign,
Yeah.
if you hit a newbie party with like 20 sort of key, of those key figures in the Church of Prius or any of the political shenanigans, you'd probably kill the mood and they wouldn't play it anymore. So it is a fine line, and actually, I would say the same in the Dee Sanction. I've tried to get across the feel and general notion of the investigation and the approach to investigation, and actually to absolutely make it really clear from the outset in two ways that you are ordinary people put in extraordinary situations. So don't expect to beat everything into a pulp when you walk up to it. That isn't the solution. And the other thing is the world is grey. There is no black or white.
Good.
And you have to make,
like
sometimes you have to make decisions where if you really thought about it, are you the good person here? Not really. In Cthulhu Hack, I've written adventures where you have to make really bad decisions, but that's horror. In this, that that you're in the grey space in between, and sometimes you can't lean towards the light. You have to lean towards the dark and leave something behind. And so that's the key part of it. So
So the design of the book is really nice as well. So I've got a shot of the covers. So we've got a hardback which looks beautiful, and the paperback you held up before. The hardback is one of the pledge levels that you can jump onto.
Yes.
I guess
Yeah.
it's like most of these things. It's probably worth having a GM copy and a table copy,
I think so. At least one or two table copies of the soft cover.
preferably seven,
It's eight.
7 or
Yeah.
8, 9,
Yeah.
12
Something like
copies of the paperback.
that. I'm not going to coerce anybody, but so yeah, yeah, obviously I wanted something a bit different. So yeah, the hardback will be a cloth cover with foil blocked
Yeah,
sigil on
yeah.
the front.
And I think the Agent of D level comes with the hard cover, doesn't it? And
Yes,
the aforementioned all rolled up,
the all rolled up.
which
Yes,
is this here.
indeed. That's the one.
Actually, I should point out, yeah. So when you held up the demo one, you couldn't see the detailing on the pockets. It did look just like a white square of fabric. So I thought it would be
There you
worthwhile
go.
just bringing this up
Yeah,
and showing that it's there's actually quite a lot of detail on that. Tell me
indeed.
about tell me about this.
So the intent there is to effectively show, because you are notionally spies. I wanted to get across some of the equipment that you may or may not carry as
Yeah,
part, and I sort of took a sort of note from the way I ran the game, and also there is probably a nod towards the sort of espionage of World War II here in
yeah,
terms of the playing card. Although I've swayed away from it. The notion is that the playing card may hide something within it in terms of its usefulness, but I also rather like the design of it in terms of sort of getting across that sort of. I think playing cards is somehow something that's associated with espionage in its own way. After all, Bond with his games of blackjack, or indeed the likes of Kit Marlowe in a game of hazard in the local drinking hall. But the other objects at the front, you have a mourning ring, which are fascinating things that came out of it seems to have sort of come out of the Elizabethan period, or at least I've seen Elizabethan examples of them, which are worn by people to sort of commemorate the passing of their loved ones, which notionally have a portrait on the inside of the ring. But the actual design of it, I think, is just glorious, with the skull and
yeah.
the motif.
So is this going to be actually on the all rolled up, or is it just
Yes, yes. So
as a print?
this is like it's a badge. So we
Oh wow, okay.
So in the we have quite a lot of all rolled ups which have a similar sort of approach.
Yeah,
For example, Mythos ones, and we've got, for example, with Miskatonic University courses and departments have got like badges. So it will be a badge that goes on the outside. And then the other object on there is the black amulet. So each agent of D wears one of these
yeah,
on a cord around their neck, and within the function of the game, the black seal is an opportunity for me to sidestep the small problem of language. In that,
yeah,
the notion is that Dee, along his various lines of study, has found a fraction of the original language that he's seeking through his study of the sort of the angels and this approach to the Enochian tongue. And he's cracked a bit of it, enough to
yeah.
be able to instill these items with the ability to allow the agents to be understood and to understand other languages. It's a universal translator.
It's a
in the
Babel fish,
Elizabethan.
isn't it?
Yeah, exactly. Whatever motif and whatever setting, I didn't.
Translator microbes.
I didn't want. Yeah, I didn't want a game where. I mean, the game in the book is set in Poland, okay? And one of the things from the outset, I don't tell people about the seal at the start of the adventure. I let them get on with it, and then they have a conversation with somebody, and they go, "Does somebody speak Polish?" And then I go, then I explain what the black seal does. But the idea is, I don't want the game is not so granular that I'm going to worry about what language you speak. And it was another opportunity to key it into D. And this whole concept of Enochian being the pre-Babel language, the language of almost creation and the angels and stuff, which would allow this greater understanding. So the idea is that it's like a fraction of that he's been able to break and instilled it within the Black Seal.
That's really cool.
To allow us to get over that small hurdle, which should make adventures in different countries slightly more manageable. But at the same time, it has the problem that the translation is effectively emotionless.
Yeah.
So you need to have other skills to be able to detect lies from people if they're talking to you in another language that you otherwise can't. So if you are in another country, you can't automatically tell in any obvious fashion that they're lying unless you go full on sort of body language or reading sort of them as an individual rather than just listening to their words.
So what you're saying is that basically this translates a bit like, and I'm sorry if this sets off anyone's electronic devices in their house, but like Alexa.
Yeah, that sort of thing. Yeah, absolutely.
Cool. I like that a lot. The design itself is really, really interesting, just in terms of the artwork choices that you've made. Is Evelyn? Just trying to scroll down now. Evelyn Moreau, who you've got as an artist.
Yes.
And let's just have a look at some of the artwork that we've got. So I think we can probably guess who this is.
That might just be the Queen herself. Yes. I love Evelyn's drawings, and I always have done. From sort of, I think I first probably stumbled across her work back in Google Plus days, back in the mists of
We're just going to keep referring to these things from the past, like Google Plus and gaming conventions.
The weird thing is Google Plus, and he disappeared like 2 years ago, but it feels like forever.
It just kind of dried up, didn't it?
Yeah.
But there was nothing to replace it.
No. Well, that's it. There really hasn't been. But anyway, that's another conversation altogether.
Absolutely.
But yeah, so I came across her work, and I love it. And that's
and these as well.
So yeah, so that's her fabulous tiny guild. So she created a set of 130 of these, and one of the stretch goals, which we've already gone through, I think it was the 7,000. She will create 20 Tudor specific ones, which will be provided as a PDF. It's down to you to do some cutting out and stuff if you want to use them, by all means, because again, we're sticking with digital. But I just love these because they're fantastic little characters. And while in the build up to the campaign, I've used all sorts of sort of classy sort of portraits and oil paintings. I love the character that she brings to her illustrations.
There's nothing like it, really. And it's it's quite interesting because it's a very 2D art style.
Yes.
But yeah, there's the layers are still there, so you very much end up with it kind of reminds me, I guess, of a lot of the kind of cartoons that we grew up on, which don't seem to exist anymore, where you do have the depth of field is presented as layers.
Yes.
But because it's been done by hand, they literally have pieces of they have the cells that they layer on top of each other, and you can kind of see that if you pay close attention. And I think this piece of art really demonstrates that really well, in that there's actually sort of 2 or 3 levels to this realistically, and each one of them is effectively a 2-dimensional piece, but it still creates that depth in a really cool way with the shadow behind the protagonist there, etc. It's really quirky. Your stretch goals are doing great.
So that's old.
That's from straight on your main page, but I did compile this a little while ago. So
that's from yesterday evening.
Absolutely. So I couldn't be bothered to update it, but we're now at £9,436. So we are all the way down to PDF Adventure 3, and the map is coming soon. It's going to be a matter of minutes. Minutes. I mean,
scary. It is still. I'm both scary and excited at the same time. It's the weirdest experience. As I said, first Kickstarter, and I am the worst possible person in the world for sort of imposter syndrome when it comes down to the certainty of the work that I do. Doesn't matter how many times people reassure me, it's good stuff.
There's always a what if, isn't there?
Yeah, and I came into this thinking, I'm going to put these stretch goals together, and I'm going to be sat here in a week's time hoping that I get to the first one. And here I am. If I look at the clock now, we are 10 minutes away from the end of the first day, and I've almost run out of stretch goals. So I am massively appreciative of the support I've got. And actually, you can just sort of see here the top of the Oscillestone map. But
just for you, I'm going to download the current version of the stretch goals, just so that everyone can see how it really is. No, I'm doing it anyway. If you're going to complain,
I was not complaining.
There we go. That's better. So we've got more art. We've got 3 PDF adventures. We've got what I very, very nearly misread as Tudor mini golf, which would be amazing. But
maybe that's further down. Maybe we haven't got there yet.
See, I would definitely be happy to put at least an extra 50p into my pledge if you're going to involve a Tudor mini golf.
Rules for Tudor mini golf. That may be somewhere. Digital rules for Tudor mini golf. 30,000 stretch goal. Yeah.
Yes, it has to be there. Has to be there, and not croquet.
Okay, no Tudor mini golf. No, you've got me. It's locked in.
I'm trying to remember what the American term for mini golf is. Oh no, maybe they do have it as mini golf, and we call it crazy golf, right? That's what it is.
Right. Yeah.
So it serves me right for spending so much time talking to my American friends. I work for a primarily American company, so my accent is all over the place. For example, yeah. I mean, you are really getting through them. You've got three stretch goals left.
Yes, scary.
So time to start thinking, my friend, about what you're going to do next, other than the mini golf.
I've got to write it down before I forget it. But I've already sketched things out. But as I said, the key thing is to keep it digital. I do not want to extend things any further.
Manage expectations.
And there may well be some add-ons down the line.
Have you thought about your where you're taking the brand moving forward? I'm not asking you to kind of go into detail, but do you have plans in the back of your mind of what you'd like to do if this is as successful as you hope it to be?
So there's a couple of immediate things. There is the Oscillestone Hundreds, which is the area of London which is in the map, which is steadily approaching at the 10k, which is it's an area close to the Tower of London, and it's also where I think both Walsingham lived there, and in the game at least Dee has a house there as well. The idea is to basically detail that area, to take the map and actually provide a more detail in the environment. It's an opportunity for me to do one of the things I love most, actually creating random tables of stuff.
I love table-based games.
So there'll be random tables of stuff. There will also be there was some glorious people at Dragon Meet last year who were kind enough to effectively show their support early, and they have bought I don't know what best way of putting it. So the infamy notoriety, or something of being named members of the trading community of the Oscillestone 100. So that's something that will come. And then the other thing is, and I touched upon it earlier, the concept of different periods of time having different sort of characters in terms of the approach to the game.
Yeah.
So I have notionally put forth on my I have a Patreon where I sort of tinker with things, patreon.com/Cthulhu Hack, where I have in the past indicated a desire to create something called Safety Lies in Fear, which covers the late 1530s through to the early 1550s, which is that period where the dissolution of the monasteries and the collapsing of the fabric begins to affect England, and is almost an opportunity to it's an opportunity to do dungeon crawling in the Elizabethan setting. So you have sort of mercenaries and adventurous types who are willing to go beyond the bounds of their village to investigate the possibilities of uncovering these relics of faith that have been left behind as churches and monasteries and so forth have been torn down or vacated, but little realizing that, as I said, the effect of this collapse in faith has allowed supernatural creatures to crawl through. So Safety Lies in Fear would cover that period using the same game system, but then provide you with options that aren't currently within the core book. So that's the sort of way I take it.
And do you think you'd bring that back to Kickstarter? Have you thought about that? I mean,
I would have
You've
to.
got a few options, so
Yeah. I
could
mean,
go either way, I suppose.
I mean, not to preempt anything, but I think my next Kickstarter would be that other game, Cthulhu Hack, which is
So Dungeons and Dragons, really?
yes, this will be a 5e edition of Dee
Oh
Sanction.
God, please,
No,
please don't.
No. So
No, at least do it with Taco.
I've been putting it off for a long time. I think Cthulhu Hack deserves a second edition, which to rest the worries of those who are fans of the system would not change the system itself. You would still get the same system, but it would give me the opportunity to clean it up, make it pretty, and actually bind in sort of information from Unformed Realms, which is about creatures and monsters, and from Haunter of the Dark, which is about creating investigations, and have it as a single nice book.
Yeah.
Probably
deluxe edition.
Hardback again with a fantastic cover and stuff. So that's
great.
one of the projects to come as well.
Cool. We've got a few minutes left. If anyone is watching and has any questions, then feel free to chime in and ask away in the comments. Tell me a little bit about your background. You've had such a huge kind of library of things that you've contributed to. What was your kind of introduction to role playing, and also what drove you to do this as a setting? I mean, how did you get from what you have been running and playing to going, I know, an Elizabethan magical?
I think it's an obvious step, but so my introduction to role playing, I'm not going to come up with anything crazy or left field here, was Dungeons and Dragons.
Yeah.
So it was at school. I had the sort of fortune of coming across Redbox Dungeons and Dragons, where I played Ironheart the Fighter for a very short about 2 adventures I think we played before we started traversing other worlds. That was my first opportunity as a player, and then as a GM I decided to go crunch heavy with Middle Earth role-playing game, which gave me the opportunity to show how little I have read of Lord of the Rings at the time. I have to say it was about 5 years ago when I finally finished reading the book. So,
I haven't read it, so I certainly feel you there.
But Middle Earth role-playing game, and then actually things like Star Trek, the faster version of Star Trek, and Call of Cthulhu, the Games Workshop edition in the green box with the that was my introduction. But after school and university, which were sort of prime times to play, I kind of then fell out of running games until like the 21st century kicked in, and I sort of picked it up again. And that was, I then actually both picked up playing games again. I had filled the period in between with play-by-mails, which is a concept which many people will not even get anymore.
Email, play-by-email.
Nope, sending letters to each other, handwritten letters in many instances. But in the 21st century, I then kicked into both playing games again and then freelancing. So
and there's been a lot of great stuff you put out there.
Paranoia, and which was a great thing. But then in terms of how I've then angled into the Dee Sanction, it goes back to school and university. I loved history. Some of the best, my best and favorite teachers and lessons over the year were in that sort of the area of history. And when I got to university, I did historical and political studies at the Polytechnic of Huddersfield. And it was modular so that you could lean as far away from politics as you could possibly get if you wanted to, which is what I did. So I ended up pretty much in the sort of the period that we, Dee Sanction sits in, or the centuries on either side of it. And then afterwards, after that, I got into things like Maelstrom. I actually had the opportunity to write for the reissue of Maelstrom with the Beggar's Companion, which was a lot of fun researching the many ways you could adventure as a vagabond in Tudor times. But it meant that when I came round to coming up with new ideas for games, this one hit me. And the thing is, in many ways, it's like my approach to the mythos in Cthulhu Hack, is that I go back to the source material and kind of search for my own answer. So I don't just accept what other people have come up with. And bizarrely enough, it has led to situations, for example, where recently Cthulhu Hack is being translated into Italian at the moment. And I had a discussion with the publisher who was querying about the Haunter in the Haunter of the Dark and whether it was a avatar of Nyarlathotep, which was the weirdest conversation to have. But I am insistent it's not, because that's not the way I've read it in the story. And I tried to explain that. But that's kind of where I've gone with Cthulhu Hack. And that's where I want to go with Dee Sanction, is taking the history and taking the diverse opinions of it and beating my own path in terms of finding ways to, find new stories and find hooks for new adventures. And that's actually where most of the adventures in the stretch goals are all things that I've run as playtests over the last several years. And they all, more often than not, arise from me finding a sentence in a book somewhere which goes, my God, really? Is that true? Even if it isn't true, let's make an adventure about it.
Let's make it true.
Yeah. So that's where I've come, and that's what I did with Cthulhu Hack. So that's
cool.
why I am where I am.
Very cool. My intro to role playing actually wasn't with D&D. My first game was second edition Vampire Masquerade in the kind of early to mid 90s when I was in my teenage years, and I actually only played 5th edition of D&D about 3 years ago for the first time, and I played, I think, was probably 3rd edition a couple of times in the very late 90s, but yeah, throughout that sort of period, I think everyone was obsessed with the World of Darkness, and really finding D&D where I was quite difficult. It was basically World of Darkness or Slay Industries,
Right.
were the big things that were in. So it's been quite interesting going the wrong way for me, and coming to D&D later in life. It means I don't have any kind of direct affiliation or core love for that game, and I can actually take every D&D like game on its own merits without it being sort of shaded by the great grandfather of them all, if you like. Millie has a great comment there. She's looking forward to being a VOD goblin.
Fair enough.
Absolutely. So what are you playing now? What games are you currently in? Are you playing or running anything?
Not really. No.
Wow.
I mean, it's actually in the build up to this. All I've been running is the Dee Sanction. A little bit of
Is that any good?
The Dee Sanction. It's fantastic. It's the bestest game
Excellent.
ever.
Excellent.
But yeah, all the any virtual con that's come up where I've got the opportunity to run a game, I've taken it. Because in the past, I would have gone to the local game store, the local con, to play test people and make them my living guinea pigs. And that's obviously not possible at the moment. So I have been just running the Dee Sanction stuff. To answer Andrew's question,
I'll bring that up. How did you come up with the concept of a Toddler shop?
They don't have shops. If Andrew thinks that they've got shops, then that's his own hyphen. So to be clear, this was a mistyping, of which there are a few on the Osselstone 100 sheet that I did for Dragonbeat. So effectively, Andrew was good enough to sign up. He claimed what was down as a Toddler. He is in fact the people who have the unpleasant job of scraping and cleaning the slurry and unpleasantness out of waterways, both subterranean and otherwise.
I see. So this isn't a retail establishment in London Soho, then?
No. No. Although, I mean, I'm aware of the existence. There is a brand of underwear called Toddler, which is, but it's not that either, Andrew. So no, tough. Get back down onto the ground with your scraping tools and get to cleaning, man.
Superb. Very quickly, let's just run through the pledge levels that you've got. So £1 gets you onto I guess the backer kit, effectively.
Comments,
£4 gets you the PDF.
Indeed.
£8 gets you the soft cover. £8 for the soft cover, really? Unbelievable price.
Yes.
Unbelievable price. So this is where you're going wrong, Paul.
Is it? Okay. Yeah.
No,
so
not
so
really.
yeah, so you have you have 4 for the PDF, 8 for the softcover, 18 for the hardcover.
18 for the hardcover.
When after the Kickstarter, the live prices will be 5, 10, and 20. Just to give you you're about to say this is where I'm going wrong. I'm going extra wrong for the Kickstarter.
You're going extra wrong by providing value for money. How dare you? How very dare you?
Yeah. And then at 40, there's the opportunity for some very kind and supportive retailers, which I'd like to support them as much in the other direction.
Absolutely.
And I certainly do buy lots of stuff from online retailers and from physical game stores, which can't sell stuff at the moment. I'm absolutely behind the retail. And then at 50, if there are any left, and you can tell me.
There are 11 left.
There you go. The last 11. He's gone. He's left me all alone.
Sorry about that. I don't know what happened there. You're alone. You're alone. There are 11 left, which is shocking.
You took that opportunity to buy all of them. Sell them on the
yeah, exactly. I'm going to sell them all for £97 each.
There you go.
So the Agent of D level, if you haven't got an all rolled up, I think is incredible value for money. You're going to get an all rolled up that isn't available anywhere else in exactly that configuration.
And then on top of that, there are some add-ons as well, because Kickstarter is experimenting, tinkering with the idea of add-ons. So you can actually, if you're inclined, you can get extra softbacks or hardbacks for your generous provision of your players at the table, or a folding dice tray of this design, which or you can delve into a bit of Cthulhu Hack if you haven't got to it already.
But there's no official dice with this campaign, are there? Look at that grin. Look at that grin. It depends on whether or not anyone buys it. Let's put it that way.
Yes.
Yeah. If the Kickstarter is successful and you manage to hit your £3,000 goal, and then some, then maybe further down the line that could be justified. I'm
not saying it's impossible. But you might have to go a little bit further on the stretch goals before it.
Yeah, let's face it. Physical products are a pain in the ass. It's expensive to produce, expensive to ship. So you need to be well into your profit margin to be able to then take that hit, I think.
It has been given some thought. It would be slightly strange because the Dee Sanction does not use the D20. So there would be no need for one in that dice set. So there would be an extra D8. Because which would be marked
D3.
Oh, D8. Marked 1 to 4 twice, because the GM uses a 1 to 4 roll quite a bit for combat. So, but anyway, so it has been given some thought. But yes, it's, as you said, physical product it's far off somewhere. But there you go.
So yeah, it's been over an hour. I must just say, because this is really funny, I've had 3 guests on in the last week and a half, and all 3 of you have been called Paul. So thank you for being Paul of the Week.
My pleasure.
I really appreciate it. I'm really excited about this game. It looks like, all being well, it'll be kind of hitting people's doorsteps April of next year. Even if there's a little bit of wiggle room.
It would be lovely if it was physical, but anyway.
I'm just going to have to turn down my my microphone a bit because my coffee machine is turning itself off. It's had enough.
Yeah, so April next year, it would be lovely, absolutely lovely if we were in the position of having physical events this year. But I'm not going to make that prediction. I wouldn't put money on it. But,
well, that'll be in good time for the UK Games Expo, which will go ahead next year.
Yes,
it must.
and even if it's virtual, it would be just in time for the UK Games Expo awards, I think. Anyway.
Yes, well, you haven't had an award this year. So.
No, not this year, no.
You have to have 2 next year. It's been an absolute pleasure. I really appreciate your time. Please, if you haven't checked it out already, check out the Dee Sanction. If you have checked it out and you've backed it, jump on and get one of those Agent of D levels if you haven't already got it. It's great value for money, and the stuff you get with it is awesome. Paul, thank you so much for everything you've done, not only with this game, but actually with contributing to role-playing as a whole. The stuff that you provided for Simbrum, for example, really helped me in starting the game and maintaining it, and it's been invaluable. And a lot of the other products that you've put out over the years have been really well received and really appreciated from everyone in the community. So I think it's fair to give you a shout out for that.
My pleasure.
But yeah, thank you ever so much. And where can we go from there? Well, next Friday I'll be on Victory Condition Gaming doing the fill in where we talk about Kickstarters. So every week we talk about the new Kickstarters that are coming, and also any of the any Kickstarters that are going to be expiring within the next 7 days. So I have a feeling that there's this product called the Dee Sanction, which I'll probably need to talk about a bit.
Just a bit.
Just a bit. So that'll be happening. But for now, thanks very much, and I hope you roll better than I do. Take care, everyone. Thank you. Bye.